Good day, and thank you so much, everyone online, for your patience. Today, May 21, the PIOJ will be having our press briefing. As usual, everyone online will be invited to participate by opening their mics after the presentation, but in the meantime, we're going to be monitoring that the mics remain closed and the cameras also remain closed. We're monitoring the YouTube live stream as well, so if you have any questions, you will have a chance for that being sent to the moderator, and it will be posed to our panel. At this time, we're going to hand over to start the press briefing to Mrs. Marcia Blake Hall.
Thank you, Gwyneth. Good morning, everyone, and let me once more apologize for the delayed start. Ladies and gentlemen of the media and those joining us virtually, colleagues, thanks for joining us at the Planning Institute of Jamaica's quarterly press briefing. Today, the Director General, Dr. Wayne Henry, will provide preliminary estimates on the performance of the economy for the January to March 2025 quarter. Dr. Henry will also be releasing the 2023 prevalence of poverty data. He is joined by Mr. James Stewart, Senior Director, Economic Planning, Research and Logistics, and Mrs. Suzette Johnson, Director, Policy Research Unit. As indicated before, at the end of the presentation, we will take your questions. Dr. Henry, you may go ahead.
Thank you very much, Marcia. Good morning, everyone. Before I provide the details on economic performance, let me remind you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the PIOJ. The PIOJ presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, and this is based on early information available from the major data providers. This release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with trends in all modern economies globally, where it is a common practice to release a first, second, and even a third preliminary estimate before the final official figures are released. The PIOJ releases a preliminary growth estimate approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed. Note, however, that the targeted timeline for the press briefing is sometimes impacted by challenges in the data collection process. Statin releases the official GDP figures at the end of the third month following the end of the quarter. The release of the preliminary outturn is used by various stakeholders, including our international development partners, the private sector, as well as the government, to inform critical planning and policy-related decisions. Today, we are reporting that real value added for the Jamaican economy grew by an estimated 0.8% in the January to March 2025 quarter, compared with the corresponding quarter of 2024. The performance for the January to March 2025 quarter largely reflected the impact of, one, continued growth momentum in some industries following the adverse effects of the hydrological events of 2024. Two, increased external demand, which was facilitated by continued growth in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners. And three, increased employment and higher levels of consumer confidence, which drove domestic demand. Real sector developments. Developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry grew by an estimated 1% compared with the corresponding quarter of 2024. This outturn was driven by growth in all four industries, namely agriculture, mining, and manufacturing. Agriculture. Output of the agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry was estimated to have remained relatively flat, with a 0.1% increase in real value added. The industry's performance reflected continued recovery, facilitated by favorable weather conditions and targeted assistance provided to farmers, which supported replanting efforts and facilitated higher levels of production, particularly for short-term crops. The performance during the quarter was due to higher productivity, reflected in an expansion in output per hectare for 5 of the 9 crop groups. Furthermore, there was a 2% increase in the hectares of domestic crops reaped. Relative to the corresponding quarter of 2024, output increased in 7 parishes, led by Manchester, up 16.1%, and Trelawney, up 5.5%. Other agricultural crops was estimated to have grown by 5.8%, reflecting increased production in 8 of the 9 crop groups. The most significant increases were recorded for cereals, up 21.7%, yams up 7.9%, legumes up 7.7%, vegetables up 7.3%, other tubers up 6.4%, and fruits up 3.8%. Traditional export crops was estimated to have contracted by 23.5%, mainly reflecting lower output for bananas, down 24.9%, and sugarcane, down 6.8%. Relative to other agricultural crops, this crop group requires a longer gestation period, that is, a longer maturity time from planting to harvest, upwards of 9 months. Animal farming was also estimated to have declined by 1.5%, reflecting lower production of eggs, down 20.5%, which outweighed a 0.3% increase in poultry meat production. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry was estimated to have grown by 0.5% due to increased output of crude bauxite, which outweighed a decline in alumina production. Crude bauxite production increased by 26% due to an expansion in the bauxite capacity utilization rate, which increased by 8.8 percentage points to 42.7% and was indicative of an uptick in demand from external parties. Alumina production declined by 2.4% due to decreased demand. This resulted in a fall in the alumina capacity utilization rate by 1.1 percentage points to 42% compared with the corresponding quarter of 2024. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing industry was estimated to have grown by 1.4% due to estimated growth in both the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry and the other manufacturing sub-industry. Higher output was recorded for the food processing component, largely due to edible fats, up 0.7%, and poultry meat, up 0.3%. Further expansion of the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry was tempered by lower production of sugar, down 5.9%, and carbonated beverages, down 6.1%. In the other manufacturing category, a fall in output stemmed lower production of non-metallic minerals due to cement down 16.7% and chemical products due to aluminum sulfate down 11.3% and salt down 11.2%. However, the petroleum component is estimated to have grown, led by gasoline up 10%, fuel oil up 11.6%, and automotive diesel oil up 27.1%. Construction. Real value added for construction grew by 1.5%, reflecting growth in the building construction and other construction components. The performance of the building construction component was pushed by a 2,355.6% growth in housing starts by the NHT. Cement supply to the industry increased by 3%, reflecting a 164% increase in imports. The estimated growth in the other construction component was due to increased capital expenditure on civil engineering activities by National Works Agency, up 234.2% to $1.3 billion, reflecting higher expenditure on the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP, and the Major Infrastructure Development Program, MIDP. Port Authority of Jamaica, up 632.1% to $3.9 billion due to construction works on the Caymanas Special Economic Zone and the Ocho Rios and Falmouth cruise terminals. Further growth in the other construction component was stymied by lower disbursements by the National Road Operating and Construction Company, NROC, which disbursed $2.4 billion, down 53%. Developments in the services industry. The services industry was estimated to have grown by 0.7%, reflecting growth in all industries, with the exception of real estate, renting, and business services. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry was estimated to have recorded growth of 0.8% in real value added, supported by increases in both electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption increased by 0.5%, reflecting increased consumption for 5 of 6 categories, namely residential, up 3.2%, general service, that's small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere, kVA, up 1.5%, power service, that's large businesses using more than 25 kVA, but less than 500 kVA, was up 0.5%, large power, that's businesses using more than 500 kVA, was up 1%, street lighting plus traffic signals was up 0.8%. These were sufficient to outweigh a decline of 15% for largest power, that's single locations that have minimum peak demand of 2,000 kVA. Water consumption grew by 1.8% due to higher consumption in both the Western Division, up 4%, and the Eastern Division, up 0.7%. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for the transport, storage, and communication grew by 1.8% due to an estimated increase in both the maritime transport and the communication components. The growth reflected the net effect of growth in the maritime transport subcomponent, reflecting higher cargo volume, up 3.8%, due to increases in cargo handled at both the Port of Kingston, which was up 1.9%, and outports, which was up 11.9%. This reflected growth in both domestic cargo, up 9.7%, and transshipment cargo, up 0.1%. Also, contraction was evidenced in the air transport component, largely reflecting decreased passenger movements, down 4.2%, due to arrivals, down 4.5%, and departures, down 3.5%. Wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim. Real value added for the WR trim industry was estimated to have increased by 0.5%, reflecting higher demand associated with the growth in employment levels and increased consumer confidence. There was a 1.2% increase in total real gross sales. Higher sales were recorded for 6 of the 8 categories, namely other wholesale and retail sales of goods and services in specialized and non-specialized stores, which was up 6.5%, wholesale and repair of household goods and office equipment was up 6.4%, motor vehicle, auto repairs and accessories was up 5.3%, textiles, clothing, shoes and jewelry was up 5.2%, retail sale of pharmaceuticals, medical goods and cosmetics was up 2.4%, and agriculture, food, beverages and tobacco was up 0.5%. Finance and insurance services. Real value added for the finance and insurance services industry increased by an estimated 1%. This performance was mainly due to increased net interest income, fees, and commission for commercial banks, supported by a general upturn in economic activities. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants industry grew by an estimated 0.8%. The outturn was largely due to an estimated increase in the average length of stay to 7.8 nights per foreign national visitor, relative to 7.4 nights in the corresponding quarter of 2024. This resulted in an increase of 3% in total visitor expenditure for January 2025 to US $456.2 million, despite a fall in visitor arrivals for that month. Preliminary data for the quarter revealed that total stopover arrivals fell by 4.7% to 744,679 visitors, and cruise passenger arrivals contracted by 13.4% to 488,206 visitors. Looking at GDP performance for the fiscal year 2024-25, for fiscal year 24-25, real value added is estimated to have declined by 0.8%. The outturn for the fiscal year reflected declines in all industries, except for finance and insurance services and transport, storage, and communication. The contraction largely stemmed from 1. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing, down 4.7%, reflecting the contractions recorded in the second half of 2024 due to the negative impact of Hurricane Beryl and Tropical Storm Raphael. 2. Mining and quarrying was down by an estimated 4.2%, mainly due to reduced demand, resulting in lower capacity utilization. 3. Wholesale and retail trade, repairs and installation of machinery and equipment, WR trim, was down 0.7%, reflecting lower output in the related agriculture, forestry and fishing, and hotels and restaurants industries. And 4. Electricity and water supply was down 1.1% due to lower electricity consumption as a result of the damage to transmission and distribution infrastructure caused by Hurricane Beryl. Looking at our short-term economic outlook, April to June 2025, this current quarter, and fiscal year 2025-26. For April to June 2025, growth prospects for the Jamaican economy are generally positive. This is based on the expectation for continued recovery from the adverse effects of the various hydrological events which impacted the island during the latter half of 2024. It is projected that the economy will grow within the range of 0.5% to 1.5% relative to April to June 2024. This performance will be supported by increased output in 1. Agriculture, due to the continued strengthening in domestic crop production and a reduction in the drag on growth from the export crop component as longer-term crops begin to recover. 2. Hotels and restaurants, due to the anticipated increase in stopover arrivals associated with events such as spring break, Easter holidays, and Jamaica Carnival. And 3. Construction, due to the impact of the rollout of infrastructure projects at the start of the new fiscal year, to include roadworks and residential and non-residential construction activities. Growth will also be supported by increased domestic demand due to relatively high levels of employment and increased consumer confidence. Preliminary data for the quarter indicate some positive movements in support of this projection. Preliminary data on airport arrivals for April 2025 indicate an increase of 5.3% relative to April 2024. This outturn was largely due to the hosting of activities associated with the Easter holidays, spring break, and carnival celebrations in April 2025. However, for the mining and quarrying industry, data for April indicate that the heavier weighted alumina production contracted by 12.3%, while crude bauxite production increased by 3.9%. The projection for fiscal year 2025-26 is for growth within the range of 1% to 2%. All industries are forecast to record growth, as recovery from the weather-related shocks in 2024 will become more pronounced in the latter half of calendar year 2025. There are upside potential and downside risks to this forecast. The main upside potential to growth include: 1, continued strengthening of most industries due to the dissipation of the adverse effects of the various hydrological events which impacted the island during the latter half of 2024. 2, relatively high employment levels and consumer confidence, which could lead to higher than expected strengthening of domestic demand. And 3, favorable weather outcomes, leading to increased agricultural output and water production. The downside risks to these projections include: 1, unplanned factory downtime associated with aged production plants, particularly in the mining and quarrying and manufacturing industries. 2, weather-related shocks, largely associated with the start of the hurricane season. And 3, lower than anticipated external demand for Jamaican goods and services as a result of slower than expected growth in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners, particularly the USA. Turning to an employment update. Regarding the employment outturn, Statin has released an update on the labor force survey for January 2025. As such, we will not present a detailed report on this area. For January 2025, the unemployment rate was 3.7%, down 1.7 percentage points relative to January 2024. Youth unemployment decreased by 3.7 percentage points to 12.3%. The unemployed labor force decreased by 26,200 to 54,500 persons relative to January 2024. The number of persons employed increased by 13,800 persons to 1,419,500 persons relative to January 2024. Male employment increased by 5,800 to 763,000 persons, while for females, employment increased by 7,900 to 656,400 persons. The number of persons outside the labor force increased by 12,500 to 681,900 persons relative to January 2024. Turning now to the prevalence of poverty data. The Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, has produced the official poverty prevalence estimates for 2023, computed from the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions, JSLC, data collected by the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Statin. Jamaica's national poverty rate declined from 16.7% in 2021 to 8.2% in 2023, the lowest figure ever recorded since poverty rates were first measured in 1989. The estimate for 2024 will be provided later this year once the JSLC data is received from Statin. As we consider the 2023 results, it is important to highlight a few considerations with respect to methodology. First, no poverty estimate is available for 2022, as the JSLC was not conducted that year due to the initiation of the National Population and Housing Census. Secondly, in 2018, Statin revised the sample design and weighting methodology applied to the JSLC sample. The 2012 to 2017 data have since been revised to account for these changes to facilitate comparability with 2018 and subsequent years. Therefore, data prior to 2012 should not be compared with data for 2012 to 2023. As such, while the trend in poverty reduction remains clear and credible, comparisons across years, particularly with pre-revision estimates, should be interpreted with caution. These adjustments in methodology improve the accuracy of national estimates, but they may affect the strict comparability of data across the full time series. In 2012, poverty in Jamaica was 19.7%. That meant nearly 1 in every 5 Jamaican was consuming below the poverty line. Poverty rates have since trended downwards, but spiked to 16.7% in 2021, likely reflecting the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. The results reflect progress across all regions of the country. In the Greater Kingston Metropolitan Area, GKMA, poverty fell from 10.4% in 2021 to 3% in 2023. While this is a positive development, we observed that there was high variability around this estimate. As such, may be less precise than others. It should therefore be interpreted with some caution. In other urban centers, OUC, the rate declined to 9% from 15.5% in 2021, reversing the upward trend observed since 2018. In rural areas, which historically experienced the highest rates of poverty, the rate dropped from 22.1% to 11.5%. This represents a decline of more than 10 percentage points. Real per capita consumption increased across all income groups, but the greatest improvements were recorded in quintiles 1 and 2, the lowest 40%. In these two quintiles, consumption rose by 12% and 16.6% respectively. In addition to this national decline in poverty, there was a reduction in food poverty, also referred to as extreme poverty. In the Jamaican context, food poverty refers to the inability of a household to afford the minimum daily caloric intake required for good health. In 2023, the food poverty rate fell to 2.8%, down from 5.8% in 2021 and 4% in 2019, marking the lowest level on record. What has driven this performance? 1. By 2023, the country had officially recovered from the shock of COVID-19 and had entered into a new growth phase. The Jamaican economy grew by 2.6%, marking the third consecutive year of economic growth since the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is important to note that prior to the pandemic, Jamaica had already embarked on a sustained growth trajectory, recording 7 consecutive years of growth up to 2019. COVID-19 disrupted that path, but we remained committed. Our post-pandemic rebound has been strong. Real value added in 2023 surpassed 2019 levels, confirming a full recovery and new forward momentum. Growth in 2023 was broad-based. It was driven by increased employment, expanded output in 9 of 12 industries, and higher external demand for Jamaica's services, particularly in tourism and business process outsourcing. This growth created jobs, raised household income, and supported the reduction in poverty. 2. Employment levels reached historic highs. In October 2023, 1.32 million Jamaicans were employed, an increase of more than 85,000 persons compared with October 2021. The unemployment rate fell by 2.9 percentage points to a then historic low of 4.2%, with notable declines across gender and age groups. Youth unemployment fell by nearly 6.3 percentage points. This indicates that more Jamaicans were actively participating in the labor force and earning incomes that enabled them to meet their families' needs and improve their standard of living. 3. In addition to the improvements listed above in the labor market, in June 2023, the national minimum wage increased by 44%, moving from 9,000 to 13,000 per week. This followed an earlier increase in 2022, and together marked an 85.7% increase over the 2 years. The minimum wage for industrial security guards was also increased from $10,500 to $14,000 per week. This adjustment, complemented by new employment contracts for security guards, ensured that this essential group of workers also benefited from the broader wage reforms. 4, social protection programs were also strengthened. Vital support was extended to those who needed it most through the Program of Advancement through Health and Education, PATH, the Social Pension Program, Poor Relief Program, and targeted interventions aimed at generating youth employment and encouraging small-scale agriculture. 5, remittances continued to be an important source of household income. In 2023, net remittance inflows totaled US $3.4 billion. While this represented a decline compared with the peak levels recorded during the pandemic, nearly half of all Jamaican households reported receiving remittances in 2023. This inflow of funds continued to bolster household resilience, especially among lower income families. 6, improved macroeconomic stability also contributed to the reduction in poverty. Inflation moderated to 6.9% at the end of 2023, down from 9.4% at the end of 2022. The debt to GDP ratio continued to decline, moving from a pandemic high of 109.7% at the end of fiscal year 2020-2021 to 73.4% at the end of fiscal year 2023-24. This increased fiscal space facilitated the support of social protection initiatives, capital investment, and the response to shocks. These developments meant that many low-income earners saw real improvements in their standard of living, lifting many above the poverty line. Importantly, inequality also declined as measured by the Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient, which is the internationally accepted measure of inequality, ranges from 0, indicating perfect equality, to 1, indicating maximum inequality. In 2021, Jamaica's consumption-based Gini coefficient was 0.3991. In 2023, it fell to 0.3560, the lowest value since 2017. This decline is significant as it shows that our economy has grown and the benefits are being shared more equitably. The goals of the National Poverty Reduction Program are to eradicate extreme poverty and to reduce absolute poverty sustainably by 2030, as outlined in the National Policy on Poverty, aligned with the Vision 2030 Jamaica National Development Plan Framework and the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Importantly, we are strengthening the tools to aid us in achieving this target. The PIOJ has advanced work on a National Multidimensional Poverty Index, MPI. This index will complement the traditional monetary measure by capturing other forms of deprivation, such as limited access to education, inadequate housing, and poor health outcomes. The PIOJ will provide an update on this important measure in due course. So in conclusion, the preliminary data presented on economic performance for the January to March 2025 quarter indicate that the economy continued to recover from the effects of the hydrological shocks during the latter half of 2024. For the April to June 2025 quarter, the economy is projected to grow within the range of 0.5% to 1.5%, while for fiscal year 2025-26, the economy is projected to grow within the range of 1% to 2%. We are cognizant of the prevailing uncertainties in the global economic space related to geopolitical tensions as well as new economic and trade policies. These uncertainties have the potential to constrain economic activities, and the PIOJ will continue to carefully monitor and assess these developments as more information becomes available. With respect to the poverty outturn, it shows potential for sustained reduction with the implementation of key policies and programs. In closing, I want to acknowledge and thank the very dedicated team here at the PIOJ. I encourage all Jamaicans to continue to collaborate as we sustain our efforts to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you, and may God continue to bless Jamaica land we love.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Dr. Henry presented on the performance of the economy for the January to March 2025 period, and he also released the 2023 prevalence of poverty data. The floor is now open for questions. Remember, you may type in the chat or you may request, and after you're identified, then you may proceed to ask your question. And I see one coming up. It's from Siobhan Wayne Campbell. And the question is, do the current growth projections include the impact of recent tariffs and other trade policy adjustments on the global market?
That's from Siobhan Campbell.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Siobhan, for the question. Yes, we have considered those factors in these growth estimates.
And Siobhan is from Nationwide. I'm still waiting. Are there any questions on YouTube or in the chat, Gwyneth? No. If there are no other questions, Gwyneth?
There's an additional one from, I believe it is Siobhan again, with reduction in poverty in 2023. Is there an expectation that this downward decline will hold going into throughout 2025?
Yeah, so there's expectation for continued reduction in poverty as we continue to roll out those initiatives around a poverty reduction program, including social protection initiatives, etc. The risk to that would be shocks, external shocks, exogenous shocks, including not just weather-related, as we would have said, but the current global economic realities, from geopolitical tensions, as well as whether trade, economic policies that may be new at this time. So a lot of volatility in the global space, and we continue to watch those. But left alone, the momentum for continued reduction, we've said, that is expected to continue.
Thanks, Dr. Henry. I am not seeing any more.
A question from the Jamaica Observer. How does food poverty relate to poverty reduction? Is there a direct correlation? So is there an expectation for both to decline? That is food poverty and general poverty reduction. Kellery, if this is not exactly what you want to say, please open your mic and you can make it clearer.
All right, let me invite Suzette Johnson, one of our poverty experts, to respond to that, please.
Thank you for that question. So both poverty estimates usually move in the same direction. Food poverty usually relates to extreme poverty because we're concerned with the household's ability to provide food to maintain their health, while the overall poverty rate looks at and includes other basic services and goods to meet the household's basic needs. So yes, they do move in tandem, and we do expect that the conditions that Dr. Henry just described will continue to affect those rates, and we expect to see positive, sustained reduction in those rates.
And there is one here from Jamelia Maitland. Can the PIOJ provide any poverty rate projection for 2024?
So yes, the gold standard is to use the household survey data, and we are awaiting the 2024 data from Statin. So as soon as that becomes available, we will share those poverty rates with you.
There was a question here before that food one, and it also relates to food. Does the current food poverty rate means that Jamaicans are now better fed and less hungry?
It means that a smaller proportion of Jamaicans are unable to provide for their nutritional needs. So there is improvement in that regard.
Okay. Gwyneth, I see there's another one. I think it's a repeat of what was asked. There seems to be one coming in, so I'll just wait a few seconds for that. Oh. Gwyneth is typing nothing else on YouTube, so it's coming in. The food.
The method or the metric on food poverty, or was that?
Okay, yes. So we have a poverty line. Jamaica uses an absolute monetary measure to estimate poverty each year, and that compares the household expenditure by individual with an absolute poverty line. A component of the poverty line is the food poverty line, and it represents the minimum amount of money that is required to purchase food that will provide the nutrition needed to maintain health for that individual. So we compare. So if the individual's consumption expenditure is below that particular poverty line, they are classified as being in food poverty.
Okay, thanks, Mrs. Johnson. If there are no more questions, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Yes, I see somebody's hand up. And one more. I'm still waiting on that one to come in. Somebody seemed to be typing. Yes, it's here. How does food poverty correlate with food security?
For food security, we want to ensure that households have access to adequate amounts of food to maintain their health, yes? So we're concerned with access, we're concerned with sustainability, and those are the areas that we want to improve to ensure that, the resilience is built within households so that they can always provide for their nutritional needs.
So that's the answer to how food poverty correlates with food security.
So once they're more food secure, we do expect that the rates will improve, yes? Because persons will be better able to purchase the foods that they need. Sustainably, yes.
And we can add that the country is building out its food security framework, currently underway with the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, fishing, mining, fishing, and with our support, so we've been collaborating with them just to build out a strong framework around food security, and that in the context of the new development plan by the Ministry of Agriculture. So we'll allow the ministry to say more, but that is ongoing work, really advancing and And we were very concerned as we saw the type of impact we had last year, Hurricane Beryl really affecting and impacting our food belt, right? Our sort of breadbasket parishes, St. Elizabeth, Manchester, some of the southern parishes. And so we've been advancing in that work. So that's a good question. And thank you, Suzette, for the response.
And a follow-up to what you're alluding, Dr. Henry, Ms. Maitland is asking, what is the potential fallout of the breadbasket, St. Elizabeth, not being able to recover as yet because of Hurricane Beryl?
So as far as we know, recovery, it's been a process of recovery happening. As we look at strengthening resilience in any regard, but particularly in the area of food security, we look at how do we diversify in terms of production, agricultural production throughout the island. So St. Elizabeth remains critical as we think of one of the food capital in terms of parishes. But then we see if that is impacted, how do we then access, while we facilitate recovery, how do we access supply and access to foods? How do we facilitate that access in an ongoing way throughout the island? So we are seeing the sort of build out through increased storage facilities in agriculture. How do we store agricultural production to generate sustainability and allow transmission through crop seasons by facilitating greater levels of storage and transportation to market, etc. So it's a I would say a complex set of activities, including farm roads and getting that sort of rehabilitation of the types of road network to include farm roads for access, but also reducing post-harvest losses, increasing our storage capacity, and we are seeing those initiatives ongoing in Manchester and elsewhere. So it's that kind of a network, Jamila, that is underway and advancing. Some systems were in place, and we'll continue to build on those.
I see another question coming in from Ms. Maitland. Can you expound on the new methodology and why it's not wise to compare data before 2012 and after? I think this is for you, Mrs. Johnson.
So the new methodology refers to how the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions sample is collected. There was a change in the sampling design and the weighting methodology introduced by Staten in 2018. And it basically addresses two concerns that existed. Now, before, we were challenged by respondent fatigue, yes? And that was partly due to the fact that the JSLC sample was linked to the sample used for the labor force survey. Staten has since delinked both so that the samples are selected independently. Other changes include levels of stratifications that have been introduced to ensure that the estimates are more precise or representative at the different levels of disaggregation that we're interested in. And also, the allocation of the sampling units that are used uses a different approach. Now, with those changes being introduced to the overall sample design, it is important that we recognize that they're not directly comparable. But I just want to make a plug here to note that we have revised the series, the poverty series going back to 2012, and when we compare both series, the estimates are within 0.2 percentage points of each other. So they're not very different, but as we go forward, we always try to improve the methodologies that we use in executing our surveys to ensure credible results for planning and policymaking.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I see a hand. So it means that another question is coming in. Oh. So I can thank everybody for participating in this morning's press briefing. Remember, if there are additional questions, you can always send them in and we will respond. The presentation will be uploaded to our website and social media pages and those of Vision 2030 Jamaica. They are displayed on this site. Join us again in August when we present on the performance of the April to June 2025 period. Have a good day and stay safe as we strive to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business.